This is advice from the inside out. It's what your justice-engaged youth want you to know. I am super excited to be able to share with you some ideas that I have about how we can help our justice-engaged youth both re-enter our school communities, but then also, of course, our social studies classroom. I have spent time inside of incarceration trying to help our students be able to have the many different skills that they would need to make better decisions about their future and preventing them from recidivism. Now, I currently work with incarcerated parents, and I also work with their incarcerated children. And I've been working with incarcerated people for a number of years. And they truly are the ones with the lived experience, so they are the experts in the field. And when it comes to what works and what doesn't work for them in their education pathways, all we have to simply do is ask them. One time I had an experience where I had a grandmother, a mother, and a daughter, all three of them in my classroom at an adult county jail facility. All three of them had a 25 to life sentence, and all three of them were waiting to be transferred to a women's state prison. I thought to myself, how unacceptable this was. Let's pretend that each one of them lives to be 80. That's a collective 240 years of an entire family lost to incarceration. It also is 240 years of collectively not having a voice in our American democracy. Do you see where some of these dangers are? Anyway, now, as any good historian would do, I've often wondered to myself, what can I possibly do for my justice-engaged youth who were trying to transition back from jail into my social studies classrooms? And I wondered exactly what it might take for them to actually enjoy the curriculum. So over the past few years, I've collected data, I've collected stories, and I've collected interviews that I like to call advice from the inside out. And basically what that is that I ask my students and my clients from inside of incarceration, and I ask them to give advice out to us, out to their teachers. And of course, more specifically, history teachers. The reason why I say that the social studies classrooms are best suited to help with these issues is because the social studies classrooms and, of course, the social studies teachers are uniquely positioned to be able to teach different things like empathy, compassion, emotional regulation, and this can be integrated into the history lesson plans. So if we make the history about these students, it might actually engage them. So what are the unique needs of our justice-engaged youth when they're transitioning from being in jail and coming back into our school communities successfully and into their social studies communities successfully? So there are a number of patterns of experiences that our justice-engaged youth, for the most part, all share. And that would be something called adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs. And the ACEs have a direct impact on student performance in schools. The more adverse childhood experiences a student has, the more likely they are to have at least one known academic concern, and that goes up exponentially. Now, these experiences, these adverse childhood experiences, are so stressful that they actually cause something called toxic stress. And that toxic stress has the ability to actually rewire the brain's chemicals and be passed down from generation to generation. And it physically manifests itself in an assortment of different ways with our justice-engaged youth. Once again, it's a generational thing. Adverse childhood experiences are things like physical, emotional, and sexual abuse, emotional and physical neglect, living with somebody with mental illness in the household, living with somebody with substance abuse disorder, the student or the client having substance abuse disorders themselves, and having a parent incarcerated. All the adverse childhood experiences are experiences that are completely preventable. So what that actually means is that it doesn't actually have to happen to a child, but it does happen to a child. In addition to the adverse childhood experiences, our justice-engaged youth all experience They all have the experience of being suspended, expelled, or dropping out of school at very young ages. These experiences happen through disengagement due to a lack of access to their educational materials, a lack of support for learning disabilities, and disengagement from the curriculum. Now, this presents significant barriers for our justice-engaged youth to stay out of jail and to never return to jail again. And so very clearly, being suspended and expelled or dropping out of school completely can be major predictors of justice involvement for an assortment of different types of students. And the school-to-prison pipeline is a real thing, and it directly contributes to the disproportionality of our justice-engaged youth inside of lockup. So as I started to work with more and more of my justice-engaged youth in actual mainstream high school classrooms, I started to think about different ways that I might be able to help the students to be able to help develop what I like to call a sense of purpose. Now, people have been doing sense of purpose work for a long time. However, a lot of that work, that type of work, doesn't really fit well with the population's background. Because most of our justice-engaged youth do not know what purpose is or do not know what their sense of purpose is, when we do talk about it, they say, I never thought about a sense of purpose because I thought I would be dead by the age of 16. And they had accepted that. When I coach and I mentor my clients and students, I ask my incarcerated students if they could please provide some advice from the inside out. So I ask my incarcerated students 3 questions. First, I ask, okay, were you ever suspended or expelled from school? And if you were, at what ages and for what reasons? Second, I ask my students, was there anything that a teacher, a coach, a parent could have said that would have helped you stay engaged with school and the curriculum? And then the third question, of course, I ask them, is what do they think their number one barrier is in going to school and being successful at school after they return from jail? So here are their answers respectfully, and I've tried to make them as short as possible, but these are short answers to very complex issues. Middle school was the most common age of suspensions and expulsions, and most were for fighting or bringing a weapon to school. Now, I can tell you this right now, 99% of the students that I worked with inside of custody all share this experience of being suspended and expelled at really young ages. Second, was there anything somebody could have said to you to keep you engaged? My students often say, make the history about us. I want to read books of people that look like me, that talk like me, that have gone into incarceration and that have made it out on the other side successfully. They want to read about that. Okay, and then the third question that I had asked was about their number one barriers. And here is where we really get advice from the inside out. It's a little bit long, but I'm going to give it to us anyway. So here is the advice from the inside out. A list of barriers that our students have to successfully navigate in order to stay out of jail and successfully re-enter their district schools. They reported a lack of family support at home, a lack of relationships with trusted adults, and positive youth influencers, especially with their teachers and their coaches. The foster care system, having unhealthy relationships, addiction and substance abuse disorders, mental health needs, having a parent incarcerated. Ooh, wow, okay. This is a big list of barriers. And you might be thinking right now, what is one little old history teacher going to do to be able to help their students reset on healthy life trajectories? Some of our students are entering our classrooms with some major issues as far as adverse childhood experience, toxic stress. And to a certain extent, right, we are the teachers. We are not the mental health providers on school campuses. And thank goodness for mental health support on student campuses. But obviously, so we're the teachers. We are the teachers who are the ones who have to unbiasedly educate our students, and we have to do it in a way that reaches every single one of them. Our justice-engaged youth were not born bad. Most of them were dealt the hands of circumstances that they did not have any control over, and they did not choose and were not in charge of being born. And so we know that the adverse childhood experiences affect the way that they find meaning in the world, and their choices are often between a bad choice and a really bad choice. They assess their decision-making based on how they will survive rather than how they will live. And that's really what it's like working with students inside of incarceration. So then how are we going to expect our students to transition from survival mode to stable engagement at school mode? Becoming a positive youth influencer and a trusted adult is crucial in ending generational incarceration and breaking the cycles of recidivism. And we do that through allowing students to access sense of purpose work through the study of history and social sciences. The justice-engaged youth are so much more than the worst acts that they have committed. I work with youth who have murdered, who have committed home invasions, armed robberies, assault with deadly weapons, and carjackings. And yet when I meet them, I don't know them like that. I'm seeing them after that. I know them in our coaching sessions as their true selves, at the core of their true selves, rather than the poor decisions that they have made. This population is a part of our country, and every child deserves equal access to education. If these students deserve to be in mainstream classrooms, then we need to figure out how to get them there and keep them there. When our students come through booking, they do not check their educational rights at the door the same way they have to check their personal items. Becoming educated means freedom. And being able to create a sense of purpose means a less likely scenario for recidivism. That is something we need to be able to convey. Literacy through social science is crucial in becoming that positive youth influencer, making the history about our justice-engaged youth, and including them in diversity, equity, and inclusion plans. Because right now, our justice-engaged youth do not have representation at the tables discussing their needs for inclusion. Social studies classrooms are an excellent place to help our justice-engaged youth make their voices heard. And that is because social emotional learning that inevitably takes place in social sciences occurs. The ability to create project-based learning in social studies classrooms lends itself to helping prevent recidivism for our justice-engaged youth. We can do this. I feel like it is our responsibility to educate and not incarcerate. This all is advice from the inside out. Thank you.